Copenhagen was once a city dominated by cars. Streets were crowded, air was polluted, and people had little space to move freely. But instead of accepting this, the city made a choice to design for people first, not cars. Over time, Copenhagen shifted its entire approach to urban planning. Sidewalks grew wider, bike lanes were added, and public spaces became a priority. Today, it is known worldwide as one of the most bike-friendly and sustainable cities, showing how a people-first design can completely change how a city works. Copenhagen did not always look like the people-focused city we see today. After World War II, the Danish capital followed the same pattern as many Western cities. The rise of the car reshaped streets, housing, and daily life. More families owned cars, and city leaders believed progress meant building wider roads and faster routes for traffic. In the 1950s and 60s, Copenhagen's historic streets were redesigned with vehicles in mind. Parking lots replaced open squares, and sidewalks shrank to make room for cars. The city was on track to become completely car-dependent, much like Los Angeles or Detroit. This model came with clear problems. By the 1960s, central Copenhagen was filled with traffic congestion. Noise levels increased, air quality dropped, and pedestrian safety declined. Children had fewer spaces to play outside, and public life moved indoors. People were using cars even for short trips, and streets that once supported community interaction turned into spaces dominated by speeding vehicles. But Copenhagen was not satisfied with this outcome. The turning point came when the negative effects of car dominance became impossible to ignore. During the 1960s oil crisis, when fuel became expensive and limited, Danish cities and politicians started to question whether the car-first model was sustainable. At the same time, local activists and residents began asking for safer streets and more public spaces. Their protests and demands grew stronger through the late 60s and 70s, pushing the city government to experiment with new ideas. One of the first steps was to reclaim small parts of the city for people. In 1962, the main shopping street, Strøget, was closed to car traffic and turned into a pedestrian zone. Many were skeptical at the time. Shop owners worried that without cars, customers would stop coming, but the result was the opposite. Strøget became lively, filled with walking, biking, and outdoor life. This success proved that designing for people could work in a modern city. From there, change spread gradually but consistently. The city created more pedestrian zones and began adding protected bike lanes. Unlike painted bike lanes on car roads, these lanes were fully separated and safe. This allowed people of all ages to cycle comfortably. What started as small projects grew into a network of bike infrastructure across the city. By the 80s and 90s, cycling was no longer seen as a temporary alternative. It became a central part of Copenhagen's transportation system. The government supported this shift by investing in public transit and limiting car access in central areas. Parking fees were raised, car lanes were reduced, and traffic calming designs were introduced in residential neighborhoods. These policies sent a clear signal: the city was being shaped for people, not cars. Today, over 60% of Copenhagen residents commute by bike daily. The city is recognized as a global model for urban sustainability. Its transformation shows that car-heavy cities are not locked into their past. With long-term planning and community support, even cities once dominated by cars can reorient themselves around people. Copenhagen's history makes one thing clear: the car-first approach was not permanent. It was a choice, and so is the decision to undo it. For other Western cities still struggling with traffic, pollution, and unsafe streets, Copenhagen's journey shows that another path is possible. However, the shift away from car dominance in Copenhagen needed more than small experiments. Closing one street to traffic or creating a single plaza was not enough to change how the whole city moved. For lasting change, Copenhagen had to rebuild its streets. This meant giving bicycles and pedestrians their own safe and reliable spaces. The rise of protected bike lanes and pedestrian zones became the foundation of the city's people-first design. Protected bike lanes were the first major breakthrough. Early bike paths in the 1910s and 20s were narrow and often mixed with car traffic, making them unsafe. By the 1970s, after years of congestion and pressure from residents, the city began investing in a new type of cycling infrastructure. Instead of painted lines on busy roads, Copenhagen built raised lanes that sat between the sidewalk and car lanes. A small curb separated cyclists from traffic, creating a clear boundary. This design reduced accidents and made cycling feel secure. Parents were now comfortable letting their children ride to school, and older residents could use bikes without fear. The lanes were also practical. They were wide enough for two riders to cycle side by side, and intersections were redesigned with clear signals for bikes. Over time, these protected lanes were linked together, forming a connected network across the city. This was critical. A cyclist could now ride from home to work, school, or shops without being forced into unsafe sections of road. The consistency encouraged more people to leave their cars at home. At the same time, Copenhagen was expanding pedestrian zones. The city's first large experiment, turning Strøget into a car-free shopping street in 1962, proved that people would embrace public spaces without cars. Instead of empty streets, Strøget is filled with walking, outdoor cafes, and busy shops. Seeing the success, the city created more car-free areas throughout the 1970s and 80s. Public squares that were once parking lots became gathering places. Streets that had been filled with cars were redesigned with benches, trees, and space for walking. The combination of pedestrian zones and bike lanes created a new rhythm in the city. Short trips that once required a car could now be done on foot or by bike. Public life shifted outdoors, and streets became places to spend time rather than just move through quickly. They also changed the city's culture. Cycling was no longer seen as only for the young or athletic. It became the normal way to get around. Today, more than 60% of Copenhagen residents commute by bike daily, showing how powerful these changes became over time. Copenhagen's rise as a cycling and pedestrian city did not happen by chance. It was the result of deliberate decisions and steady investment. Every year, the city added more kilometers of protected bike lanes, improved the quality of existing ones, and connected them to public transport. Each project built on the last, creating a citywide system. For Western cities looking for change, Copenhagen shows a clear path forward. The lesson is not only about promoting bikes or banning cars, it's about building streets that make cycling and walking safe, reliable, and convenient. When the infrastructure is there, people will use it. Pedestrian zones and protected bike lanes are not extras, they're the backbone of a people-first city. Meanwhile, the rise of protected bike lanes and pedestrian streets gave Copenhagen a strong foundation. But for these systems to work in daily life, the city needed more than just separate paths. Urban design had to prioritize safety and efficiency at every level. This meant looking closely at how streets were built, how intersections functioned, and how people could move without delays or conflicts. One of the key design decisions was separating different types of traffic early. In many cities, cars, cyclists, and pedestrians compete for the same space. This often leads to confusion and accidents. Copenhagen's approach was to create a clear order: sidewalks for people walking, raised lanes for cyclists, and separate lanes for cars. Each group had its own dedicated space, and the boundaries were marked by curbs or small height differences. This reduced uncertainty and made it easy for everyone to understand where they belonged on the road. Intersections were also redesigned to focus on safety. Copenhagen introduced dedicated traffic lights for bicycles, giving riders their own signals separate from cars. At busy junctions, stop lines for cyclists were placed several meters ahead of car stop lines. This gave cyclists a head start when lights turned green, improving visibility and reducing collisions. These small adjustments made a big difference, showing how safety can be improved with careful street design rather than relying only on rules and enforcement. Efficiency was just as important as safety. If cycling and walking were going to compete with cars, they had to be not only safe but also fast and convenient. To achieve this, the city developed what became known as the Green Wave for cyclists. On major routes, traffic signals were timed so that cyclists traveling at a steady pace could pass through multiple intersections without stopping. This made cycling not only healthier, but also quicker than driving for many trips. The design rewarded consistency and reduced frustration, encouraging more people to choose bicycles for commuting. Another important choice was traffic calming in residential areas. Instead of allowing cars to speed through neighborhoods, Copenhagen introduced measures like narrowed roads, speed bumps, and shared spaces where vehicles move at walking speed. These designs gave priority to people, not traffic flow. Parents felt safer letting children play outside, and local streets became part of community life rather than just routes for cars. Public squares and gathering areas were also redesigned with safety in mind. By reducing car access, adding clear lighting, and open space for people, these areas became more welcoming and secure. Safety was treated as a design feature, not an afterthought. For Western cities that are still car-heavy, Copenhagen's example shows that safety and efficiency do not come from more lanes or faster car routes. They come from redesigning streets where people can move easily without risk, separating modes of transport, giving cyclists priority at intersections, and designing for steady flow all add up to a city where walking and cycling are the most practical options. Copenhagen's transformation proves that safety and efficiency are not separate goals. When streets are designed for people first, both can be achieved together. Cars may still exist in the city, but they are no longer the center of its design. Instead, every urban decision reflects the idea that a city works best when its people can move safely, quickly, and comfortably without relying on cars. The redesign of streets in Copenhagen focused on safety and efficiency, but the city's transformation went further than bike lanes and intersections. To truly build a people-first model, Copenhagen had to rethink how housing, parks, and transit fit together. The goal was simple: make daily life work without depending on a car. This required long-term planning that connected where people live, where they relax, and how they travel across the city. One of the most important strategies was the Finger Plan, first introduced in 1947. This urban plan laid out the future growth of Copenhagen in the shape of 5 fingers stretching outward from the city center. Along each finger, housing and workplaces were built close to train lines, making it possible for residents to commute by public transit instead of cars. Green spaces filled the gaps between the fingers, protecting nature while also giving people easy access to parks. This integration of housing, parks, and transit created a structure where sustainable living was built into the city's design. Housing development was not placed far from the city, where car use would become necessary. Instead, new neighborhoods were designed so that people could walk or cycle to school, shops, and train stations. By keeping daily needs within short distances, the city made it practical to live without a car. At the same time, the transit system gave residents reliable options for longer trips. Buses, metro lines, and regional trains were all linked, and bicycle parking was added at stations to make switching between cycling and transit easy. Parks and open spaces played a central role. Instead of treating green areas as leftover land, Copenhagen planned them as part of daily life. Every neighborhood was designed to be close to a park, plaza, or public square. These places were safe, clean, and accessible by bike or foot. Parks provided more than recreation. They acted as gathering spots, improved air quality, and helped manage flooding by absorbing rainwater. The integration of nature into the city showed that sustainability was not only about transportation, but also about the environment people live in every day. Transit investment also shaped how the city grew. The expansion of the metro in the early 2000s continued the finger plan vision, keeping housing and transit aligned. At the same time, cycling was supported by bike superhighways, longer routes connecting suburban areas to the city center. These routes linked directly to transit stations, making it possible to combine cycling with trains or buses. The result was a city where mobility was flexible, efficient, and not dependent on driving. For Western cities, this model highlights a key point. People-first design is not only about changing streets, but about reshaping how entire neighborhoods are built. If housing is spread far from transit, people will default to cars. If parks and public spaces are disconnected, people lose the chance to spend time outdoors. Copenhagen avoided these problems by aligning housing, parks, and transit in a single plan. Today, Copenhagen is known not just for bikes, but for the way its urban design connects homes, green spaces, and mobility. It's a city where daily needs are within reach and where public life thrives outdoors. For cities facing sprawl, congestion, and weak transit systems, Copenhagen shows that integration is the solution. By planning housing near transit, protecting green spaces, and making walking and cycling the easiest options, a city can move away from car dependence and toward a healthier, more sustainable future. Moreover, the integration of housing, parks, and transit set the stage for Copenhagen's people-first city model. But the true test of these changes came in their outcomes. The redesign of the city did not only change how people moved, it also transformed Copenhagen's economy and social life. Looking at these results helps explain why the model is now studied worldwide, and why other cities see it as a path forward. One of the most direct economic outcomes was lower costs for both residents and the city itself. When more than half of the population chooses to bike daily, the savings are clear. Families do not need to own multiple cars, which reduces personal expenses for fuel, insurance, and maintenance. At the city level, building and maintaining bike lanes is far cheaper than expanding highways or parking garages. Studies from Copenhagen have shown that every kilometer cycled produces a net gain for society, while every kilometer driven comes with a cost in congestion, pollution, and road wear. In other words, the system pays off by making sustainable travel more affordable to maintain. The diversion also supported local businesses. Pedestrian streets and cycling routes bring more people past shops, cafes, and markets. Unlike cars that drive through quickly, people on foot or bikes stop more often and spend more locally. Strøget, once considered a risky environment when it was closed to cars, became one of the most successful commercial streets in Europe. Similar outcomes appeared across the city as more car-free zones were introduced. By giving space back to people, the city created environments where businesses could thrive. Health outcomes added another layer of benefit. With safe cycling routes and parks integrated into neighborhoods, daily exercise became part of normal life. Residents cycle to work, walk to shops, and spend time in green spaces without needing to schedule extra fitness routines. This has led to lower rates of lifestyle-related diseases, reduced healthcare costs, and higher overall well-being. The economic savings in healthcare are difficult to ignore, and they reinforce how urban design directly influences public health. On the social side, Copenhagen's changes reshaped community life. Streets and squares that were once filled with cars became spaces where people meet and spend time. Outdoor seating, playgrounds, and walking areas encouraged interaction between residents. Safety improvements also meant that children could walk or cycle independently, strengthening trust and freedom in daily life. The city became more inclusive as cycling and walking are accessible to a wide range of people, regardless of income or age. There was also a diversion in equality. Car ownership often creates a divide between those who can afford it and those who cannot. By designing for walking, cycling, and transit, Copenhagen gave everyone access to mobility. Students, elderly residents, and lower-income families could all travel reliably without needing a car. This reduced dependence on personal wealth and supported a more balanced social structure. For Western cities still struggling with congestion, rising healthcare costs, and declining community spaces, Copenhagen's outcomes show what's possible. The changes are not only about transportation, they delivered economic growth, healthier populations, and stronger social connections. The model demonstrates that investing in people-first design creates returns far beyond the streets themselves. Overall, Copenhagen's story proves that when cities prioritize people over cars, the benefits multiply. Lower costs, healthier communities, stronger businesses, and more inclusive mobility are not abstract goals. They are measurable results. Other cities can reach them too, if they commit to reshaping urban design with the same focus and persistence.